Alright, this is it. Today we've been talking about the history and the timeline that is our true history and our true timeline, and it's been avoided and laughed at and thought silly, and I don't think it is at all silly. Now, this we're going to get back to in a minute, but what the takeaway today is going to be that the things that were written about were not silly things. They were things that should be looked at and thought about a little deeper, because these people were actual people. There is actual written records. There is actual information, a plethora of it. It exists everywhere on the face of the earth. It just needed to be examined, and Velikovsky is a great source, examined a lot of it. So anyway, we're going to go into this, and we're going to be seeing this again shortly. Thanks. All right, so let's go through this again. Before the prior times were the beginning. So this is the sequence. The beginning times, the prior times, the olden times. The gods came to earth in the olden times. All right, so before that was the prior times. Before that was the beginning, which I'm saying is chaos. From chaos, the original story was the Titans. So I'm saying chaos, prior times is Titans. Then the Olympians and all that stuff came down from Mount Olympus and all that business. That's what it says in the ancient text. That I'm saying must be the olden times. Now in the Bible it says they were in the ground. The giants were in the earth in those days. They were the men of old. The men of old. The men of the olden times. The men of renown. And Genesis 6.4 never has been understood. When they say there was giants in the earth in those days, it's two sets of giants. There was giants in the earth in those days. Those were the men of old, the men of renown. Then there was more giants after that, when the sons of God went into the daughters of man. Those were the new giants. They weren't the men of old, the men of renown. They obviously were new giants. If there was giants in the ground in those days, and then after that is exactly what it says. There's two complete sets of giants. So, beginning times is chaos, prior times is Titans, olden times is the Olympus and the new gods that showed up on earth, apparently, Poseidon and all that. And that was not that long ago. But if you go by this is where it gets real confusing, because in the olden times the gods came to earth. Now that was just fine. They say the gods came to earth. Now, were those the gods of the latest gods, or were they the ones? No, they say they created the earthlings. Now that apparently talks, well, it might be that the gods were 450,000 years and only the last 6,000 or something here on earth, something like that. I'm going to have to think that one over. It's Roger, Mud Fossil University, in the extreme deep end of the pool today. We are going to go to the actual history of our entire universe that I can get back. Well, alright, it's Roger, Mud Fossil University, in a very deep subject today, which is our origins. And it goes back to the Sumerian texts that I am going to refer to here. And this is the Free Use Act. There's no money to be made here, so the copyright things is just commentary that doesn't apply. Now, this is Squibblejack, excuse me, and they did this marvelous presentation of Enki's tablets, the lost tablets of Enki, which they did find, these clay tablets, and it contained this account of the Sumerian creation texts. Now, I am going to expand the screen, and I'm going to read it as it goes through, and then I'm going to stop here and there and point out things for you to listen to that are of prime importance. Then we're going to analyze exactly what they mean, because they become very confusing very quickly. All right, so listen to what I'm going to just read it to you. Well, let me set it up for you. The gods came to Earth at some point in the past here. It said to mine gold to fix the atmosphere of their origin planet, which is in our solar system and still will be coming by here. It comes by every 3,600 years. That is what they say. And these people live for thousands of years. And they're immortal, some of them, or all of them, I'm not sure. But anyway, these two sons were supposed to take over. Well, one son was supposed to rule, and the other one didn't want to give it up, or it became a fight between the two sons. Then they were allowed to use the weapons of mass destruction, which were the nuclear weapons, apparently, because it said it swept through the evil winds afterwards and killed everything. His black-headed Nubians and his sheep, and it poisoned the waters, and everybody took refuge away. All of the people took their rocket ships. Literally, they had rocket ships. They took off and they got out of the atmosphere. So this is the account, and I am at a point right now where I believe this is fact. That's my feeling. You can take any. I really don't care how you approach it. I'm just showing what I'm showing because I think people should take these things a little more serious. Take a look at it. It may be just fantasy, but I think the other fantasy is more what we're looking at today. So I'm going to just read this as we go. Here they go. The two sons, full of glee, with quickened step, from Enlil's chambers they emerged. For weapons they were departing. Now, the other gods gave them their approval. So they said the gods turned back to their cities. This is on earth. None of his own calamity had they a foreboding. They didn't have any clue what was going to happen to him. Now, this is the account of the prior times and of the weapons of terror. Now, when he says prior times, there's a set of different times. Now, this is very important, and I have all this set up later, and we'll look at it in detail. But again, I'm going to stop here and there. But listen to the sequence, the prior times, the beginning times, the olden times. Here it goes. So, before the prior times, there was the beginning. And that's normally what everybody says is chaos. After the prior times were the olden times. In the olden times, the gods came to earth and created the earthlings. Now listen, in olden times, they came to earth and created the earthlings. The gods. Olden times. Now listen, because this gets tricky. Then, in the prior times, the gods came to earth and created the earthling. You see that? It was olden times and the prior times. All right? That's really important. Now, in the prior times, the gods came to earth and created the earthlings. Right? In the prior times, none of the gods was on the earth, nor were the earthlings yet fashioned. I'll tell you, it's confusing. That's why we got to look at this a little deeper. Now, in the prior times, the abode of the gods was on their own planet, and Nibiru was that planet. And they go into big detail about that planet. A great planet, reddish in radiance around the sun in an elongated circuit Nibiru makes. Around our sun, it's in the cold for a long time. It's engulfed, and part of its circuit by the sun strongly it's heated, so it's hot and it's cold. It normally has a thick atmosphere, and it's because of volcanic eruptions that constantly feeds the atmosphere. And it sustains all manner of life because volcanism is feeding the planet. Without it, there will be only perishing. In the cold period, the inner heat of Nibiru keeps about the planet like a warm coat, constantly renewed. All right. I don't want to bother going too deep in this because this goes, and it's a fabulous thing. There's 6 of these videos that are just like reading a book. But it's nice. It's easy to read. It's very, very engrossing to me. And it tells all about how we started our lives and how they even escaped their planet and came to mine for the gold, and how they approached the different planets, how they got through the asteroid belt. Absolutely incredible. And how they set up the celestial boats, and that's when you see all the minarets and things all over the eastern world. That's all from Baalbek, and those were the launching pads. You can laugh if you want, but that's what I'm reading. And if it turns you off, that's fine. Anyway, we're going to go into the actual timeline, and now we're going to back it into some other books that were written and see how that works out. Okay, we went through the what it said in the texts in the Sumerian tablets, and there's literally 100,000 of them, probably, or more, of those texts tablets. So this is not something that's a silly thing that somebody found and made it up. These are real. Now, so let's go. That was Enki. Now let's just start from the beginning, which is chaos, because that's what he says. It's the beginning. Because the beginning is the beginning. Nobody knows what the beginning is. And nobody, I have found, knows what the beginning is. It's called chaos. And it was brought into existence by a word or a thought. There's a different... I read so many texts and so many theories, but they're ancient texts. That's the ones I take into account. I don't take into account any of the modern stuff. And some of the ancient Hebrew texts, and then there's all these Gnostic texts, and I've read one that even said something about that the letters actually were jealous of each other, and they wanted it to be the most important letter, and it was spoken. It's very, very confusing, and it's so hard to believe, but I found so much other stuff that could not have been believed, but it is all in fact true and provably true. So let's just say in the beginning there was chaos. That's what everybody says. The hot was with the cold. The hard was with the soft. The love was with the hate. Everything was one in a mass of unstableness. All right, and then apparently it started to sort itself out, and this one separated from that, and the light separated from above, the ether, which is now proven, and the magnetic fields of ether have actually been photographed, and I have the photographs of that. These things were separated from the waters, and they are liquid. As liquid was separated from the liquid above, from the liquid below. And the Titans, apparently, so now that's the beginning times. Then there was the prior times. Now, they said God came to earth during that. I think that was a mistake in the text written, or the way they printed it on that screen there, because then they said there was no gods on earth at that time. So I'm saying the Titans came to earth, and they were the ones that the Gaia story. That's all I can say. Because Enki has no clue either. He says before there was the beginning times, then there was the prior times, then it was the olden times. Well, the prior times are when the giants were in the earth, the Titans. Right? That was the prior times. The olden times were, and I had to be determined, but I think in my mind the olden times were when the gods ascended to earth, which is what Enki said, and created man. Those are the olden times. Now, the Bible that I'm familiar with talks about the men of old, the men of renown. All right. Now, were they the Titans? Yes, I believe they were. And then even in the olden times, they were the new giants. There's two complete sets of giants. Totally misunderstood Genesis 6.4. It says there was giants in the earth in those days. Those were the men of old, the men of renown. That's the way it's supposed to be read. There were giants in the earth in those days. Those were the men of old, the men of renown. Then after that, when the sons of God went into the daughters of man, there was more giants. Those were the new giants. They weren't the men of old. They were the new giants. Two separate sets of giants. And the reason the new set of giants came about was because the DNA from the earth was the original Titans. You're not supposed to mess around with that DNA, with the angel DNA. And that what happens is when it hit the other one, bada bing. And you got giants miles tall and absolutely insane sizes. Built for some other dimension, as far as I can determine. Some maybe they were built for Nibiru. I don't know, but it didn't turn out well. Let's put it that way. And then things went bad. I don't know what to say after that. But it's hard for me to put this stuff into perspective, and it's going to be hard for you too. And it's going to go into a lot of people's belief systems and bother them tremendously, I'm sure. I'm just showing you what I see was written. And it talks about Gaia, it talks about the Titans, it talks about the Olympians, it talks about the Atlantis, it talks about Poseidon owning Atlantis. It talks about him dividing up the world between the gods. It talks about all of these crazy things, the Gorgons turning people into stone, which I have literally, as far as in my mind, I've proven every single one of these things to be factually there. And I'll show you the evidence, and we're going to end up in Morocco in a minute. But let's go back to this. The gods came here, let them make them in our likeness. That's what they did, our likeness. It wasn't just one god, it was a bunch of gods. And some of them went bad, apparently. It's 200 of them out of 600. Or whoever the top guys were, I don't know. But it was some kind of a bureaucracy. And they got sick of work, and they wanted people to do the job, and that's when they created man. That's what it says in the Sumerian text. I'm going to go with that. Because it says that they created Adam and Eve, and they put them in the garden, whatever that means, to work or to just enjoy their lives, I don't know. Anyway, and that date, I don't know when that date was, when the gods arrived. Some people say 6,000 years. Some people say, I don't know what they say. Now, but I can tell you this, the gods were here. Plato puts Atlantis collapsing 11,600 years ago. Not being built, collapsing. I don't know how long they lived there, but there was, this was a very, very advanced culture, Atlantis. And Poseidon owned it. That was his lot given to him when the gods divided up Earth. And Poseidon was some of the lineage from the Titans that were overthrown and so forth. And anyway, Plato puts that at 11,600 years ago. It collapsed. Now, then there was a great flood. That was 4,300 years ago. That's pretty well understood. Now, I have found, and others that I'm working with, have found these gigantic feet and gigantic feet with no toes. I have one around here somewhere. Cannot find it now. But anyway, they're what we're calling no toes. And I'll show you, I'm going to show you this all in a minute. And then we're going to show you what's in Morocco. And all of this stuff is on the surface of the earth. It's not buried underneath the earth. And some of it is just literally starting to decay. So, what you're going to see is so spectacular that you're going to have a brain freeze. And I'm just telling you, I am showing you what I'm showing you. You make of it what you will. I'm trying to come up with a timeline where we have an actual truth about our history, because it's so far off, it's absolutely unbelievable. They don't take into account the flood, don't take into account carboxylation of any kind of organic tissues, which is carbon moving, never, ever, 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 ever fixing. And they come up with these timelines that have no place in reality whatsoever. So, and I have Triassic rock here with human footprints in it. I have a Triassic goose head. I have all kinds of things that they say can't exist and do exist, and they refuse to look at. And I have DNA from certified DNA labs, CAT scans. I have 3 DNA tests. 2 of them are giants. One of them is a normal human. So along right there, that's been DNA tested. And this has been DNA tested. This is a fingertip that's highly eroded, but I have the rest of the fingertips, not all of them, and I have this is the bone ball and the muscle tissue and the connective tissue that runs down from the ligament, right from the palm, and I have the palm, and I have another big finger over here of that, and other things all over the place here. Anyway, let's go to Morocco. I want to show you, and these are giants, and they're DNA tested. There's no question. It's a certified lab. Anybody want to fight it? Come on. Yeah, I've done it. You can prove it to prove me wrong. I paid to have it done. You pay to prove me wrong if you think I'm wrong. But I don't think you should be teaching the kids that I'm wrong when I am right, and I have the evidence, and you have nothing. All right, so getting as far back to the timelines as I can get to is Herodotus was one of the earliest history. Well, he was the father of history. He wrote the histories. He was absolute fabulous. You want to read his stories about all the ancient times. It was all about stealing each other's wife. Absolutely amazing. The guys would show up with their ships and they'd be trading and they'd run off with the guy's wife. Once that one after, it's really funny. It really is. You got it. But he went throughout the whole world at that point to gather these stories. And here he puts Atlantis right here. That's the Eye of the Sahara. It's right there. That's the first map really that was ever made, and that's Herodotus. So that's that. Now let's go into Morocco. Here we go. Now let's zoom out of here so we can see this whole thing. Now this is Africa, as you can see. Right there, and we're looking straight down the globe. We're coming up here. Now, if you can see, this is where this is Atlantis right here. That's Eye of the Sahara. And Plato says it was there and how it collapsed and how no more mud in the world would ever be spoken of. So much mud ran off that day. And it all ran out of here and created the Cape Verde Islands. And there is a little volcano, so I have a feeling they're going to say it's a volcano. It might be there. But that's skirted around it. And anybody with eyes in their head can see that is exactly what happened. That flooded out of there like who knows what. I mean, this was an ocean. And they know that. There's all kind of bones, whales, and all kinds of. Anyway, you can see it. It ran off. Now, so let's go in here to Atlantis. This is Atlantis, and I can tell you right now, those colors are from transition metals because they had the walls coated with bronze and brass and auriculum and copper, tin, whatever it was. They had a whole batch of them. Now, I've gone in here and I found every bit of Atlantis. All the boat slips are still here. They have to come down here and protect this. All of the boatways come up here. These are where the slips were, where the boats came in. All right, this is Atlantis, and Plato puts it here. All of the water ran out of here. There was a strait right up here, and if you zoom in here, you can see where the strait was. It was right here. They built some kind of an entranceway, and the gates were manned on both sides. I looked at it very carefully, and that's the straits that they were talking about, and it overran all this and collapsed down. Now, in addition to that being Atlantis, so I'm saying this is 11,600 years ago. All right. Now, what can we glean from this? Where did this run from? That was 11,600 years ago. What else happened 11,600 years ago? Well, it all ran out of here. It all ran out of here. Look, see that? Let's see if we can find out where it ran from. Well, I can see it come running out of here. There's no question it ran out of there. If you can see that, I think you can see that. It ran right out of there, right? You see it where it ran out of here? All the stuff running down, it's almost like dribbled down there. Well, I wonder where that came from. It came from all this red area, which ends up having to be the death blood from this creature that runs all the way down here. That's his back, this is his legs, all the way up here, that's his head. Let's go look at his head and his neck. You see this here? When things die, they leach and they have effluent that comes out of them. And death is red and black. Red and black is the blood. Red and black blood. Now, you see this? That is the pattern of leaching away from this decomposing whatever it is. Let's see what it is. I'm saying this is a dragon. And I'm saying that's a dragon scaled throat. All right? And that goes a very, 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 very long way. Hundreds and hundreds of miles. Now, a geologist will say, oh, that's just accidental. It just looks like a dragon. Well, I don't think so, because mountains and hills don't have the fluty looking things that are on the sides of dragons that you see in the parades and all that business in China. And mountains don't have flary red eyes like dragons do that are in that parade. and they don't have noses like this and throats where they still have dragon scales coming out of their dragon scale throat. And this also is spitting something, and it's spitting it down here, and let's see, it seems to be almost like it's eating away at something when it hits there. So let's see what's coming out of his mouth. Here's his mouth. See? Spitting that stuff, whatever that nasty stuff is. Let's see what it is. Alright, that's pretty, it's pretty not nice. I would say unnice you could go with. Now, and it apparently has some kind of combustive effect. And it did all this. What that is, I have no idea, but it looks like it spewed something and tied something all in here. Now, let's see, as we follow it down, it actually seems to eat away at the tissues of a giant fish that happens to be down here. So that dragon was apparently trying to bite that fish's fin. That's the fish's fin right here. And it did. It could bit the fin, and it came down, and it actually ate away at the fish's skin here. See it? See how nasty looking that is? It came down there and ate up that stuff. Alright? Now, let's see what that fish looks like. There's a fish right there. It says that in the Bible too, or somewhere in some religious text. I don't think it. Well, it talks about the behemoth and the leviathan, and the leviathan's home was to the west of Eden. I don't know what to say, but you got dragons, you got fish, and if you go in there, go in there yourself. You go look in there. That's a fish. That's a fish's fins. You see, some people say, "Oh no, the fish is going this way." No, the water would go up under his fins, and it's not. And his tail is back here anyway. You see here, that's his tail. See his face, it comes up here and there's his tail. But you can see that ran over that fish. So Atlantis appears to have drained maybe at the same time as these guys died together. I'm seeing this ran out with it. I'm seeing this has run over the top of that fish. To a little bit. It's like the swale in where his tail would be. So some of it ran over here, the rest ran around the back, and all of that stuff came from that dead, decaying dragon whose tail goes way back to here. Now, I didn't show you the back of his tail, but you go back here and the same effluent is running off this dead, decaying dragon's tail. You see that? That's the transition metals, and there's where it stops. And that's what happens when people die or creatures die. Anybody that does a coroner, they understand that. You go see a coroner, and they'll tell you exactly what that is. And that is what it is. And you come in here, and apparently these are his legs, or his wings, or I don't know what they're. But in here is, I think this is all his intestinal area. You see? All those different colors and so forth. And then you come up into his stomach, and then you get into his dragon-scaled throat. You see it? Those are all dragon scales. And then you come all the way up his dragon-scaled throat. All the way up into his head. There it is. You see it's running off, his body is leaching off here. So these events happen, and this is above the ground. So these are not they're not below the ground. They're not covered up. So I'm going with this all happened at the same event. That's my take at this point. So I'm saying this is 11,600 years ago. Death of the behemoth and the leviathan, collapse of Atlantis, virtually same time. And then it talks about the Atlanteans arriving over at the highlands of Ethiopia, advanced in every way, sophisticated, and they took over the round-headed, because these were the long-headed people. They took over the round-headed people over here in Ethiopia. And that was apparently somewhere in this 11,000 time frame. And of course they colonized the rest of the world too, because they got caught unaware, is what Plato said, and Herodotus and all those early writers. That's exactly what they said. They got taught. It happened in one day, bloop, done. And apparently, if it took one day for to drain the whole thing, by the first few seconds they were out of commission. So, and that's why this area has to be protected, and it might be going to be protected. We'll have to see how it works out. Hopefully, somebody's going to pay attention to it, and we'll see. Now, so anyway, they arrived out of the mud. It says they arrived out of the mud, sophisticated in every way, and they apparently, is what was written, was the Ethiopians attacked them with spear and point, or spear and arrow, or something like that, and they literally froze them in their tracks. They could not move, and they let them go after a short time. Apparently, they unfroze them somehow. That's what it says. I just am relating what I had read now, and I can't even source that right at the moment. But that was what it says. Mike Manley Hall might have had that written. Somebody wrote it, and at that point they were worshipped like gods, because they were gods. Poseidon owned it, and these were all gods. They were coming down, a lot of gods, not all gods, but they were from the early stock, and they were highly diluted at this point. The bloodline was infected with mortals, so it wasn't very pure in all respects at that point. And then there's other stories about Deucalion, and it's so much to read and to understand, and it gets so confusing. I mean, I hate to try to say all these things and then end up confusing you, but it's confusing. So we're just going to have to play it by ear and go to the next step. All right, I found these 5 or 6 years ago, and didn't fully understand them until other ones were found, and these were found recently, a year or so ago, out in Missouri, and they're finding them all over the world. I'm getting them like every day from virtually everywhere. And this shows, you see this? This is when they erode. These are the springs that were inside of them, hooked up to the heel. That's the heel. And we did a lot of work on these, and this is not something that we're missing anything on. And here's they have some kind of like wing nuts and bolts and springs in them, and gummy pads built into the bottom of them, and they're all over the world, and they are above ground. And you see this was the whole guide. And the reason these things have retained the way they retain is because when the flood happened, which I believe was 4,300 years ago, somewhere in that area, when that happened, the creatures were so huge that they tried to stand up and to live through this deluge, and at some point they drowned, or they starved to death, stuck in the mud, or on the surface, buoyant, standing up. That's what I am taking away from this. And that's why I call them mud fossils. They were I would think this was stuck in the mud and straight up, like this guy was. And when the waters will leach all of the organics out of that, and all of that organic material coming out of that is clays, and that created the layer that they think was the KT extinction. That was the Great Flood. That was only 4,300 years ago. There was no KT extinction there, not whatsoever. And that's why the iridium is there, because it's in the same amount there as it is in creatures. Every transition metal is in every creature that lives, that depends on blood to transport minerals and gases and so forth into the body. That's how it works. And there's iridium, there's 100 transition metals. So it's not just iron, it's not just copper and silver and gold. You've got iridium too. And the iridium is what they found in this clay layer. Clay doesn't come from outer space. Well, it might, but it doesn't come. That was not what they found. Clay, which is skin. It's skin and it's flesh. They found a gigantic bathtub ring, which everybody that was a creature soaked, and it soaked all of that clayish stuff off the surface, away from the tissues, and out came the hydrocarbons into the water and so forth, and the gases dissolved, and they became semi-stabilized in the water. When they dried out, they just separated along what's called fascia. I did a paper called Fascia Facilitated Fossilization, which the fascia actually coats each cell and each body part in a creature exactly, well, here, when you're dead, it's exactly the same as when you're alive. The fascia does its job by separating out tissues. And this is fascia. You see that? That's a lung. That lung was DNA tested. And that is fascia that's on there. All right? And that fascia, see, it's like a fabric. And that's its job, is to keep this separated. See, here's the blood, where the blood is on they call that the tongue. This is the texture of it. This is the depression of the heart. It's a left lung. It's human, 100% human, DNA tested. And fascia keeps the bones separated like this. You see that? This is a complete bone with all of the different cartilage and the periosteum, whatever they want to call it. They used to call it the tunica. It's all wrapped right around there. You can see the the little triangle looking wrap that it has to it. That's how all bones are. They're wrapped with a fabric. It's amazing. It really is. This stuff is like the detail of the anatomical detail is absolutely phenomenal. You see those little tiny holes in it? Those little tiny holes inside of those ligament attachment areas. That's where the tendon ball entices go. The little tiny ones that they find all over the earth, only they're gigantic all over the earth because the creatures were gigantic. So that's just how that works. And there's so much to this, and it falls right into line with all of these texts we're talking about. They created them. They created them. And then somehow we evolved to what we have now, whether I don't know exactly how that happened. I mean, I don't have any clues to this stuff. I'm telling you, I'm just saying, here's what happened. I had to find out what this is all about. Once I found the giants and had them DNA tested, no question whatsoever, and everybody avoided it. So I started speaking about it, and everybody hit me with this stuff. I mean, this is I get from all over the world, daily, all over the world. And the things are so incredible as to be absolutely mind-blowing. And that's the problem, because it's so intense, and it's so true, and it's all about the Titans, it's all about the Earth being a ball of creatures, literally. And it really was alive, and is alive, and could die. Mars is dead. And I've done this is no question whatsoever, the things I'm saying. If you look at it and study it, and oh, the guy's crazy, no. Just look, and then comment on it then. Because what I find very distasteful is that everything is dismissed after having DNA and CAT scans and anatomists, a guy that owns his own autopsy school, verified every single thing I'm saying. And you can't miss it with your own eyes if you look. It's impossible to miss. So that's the key. And people are going to be hurt from not looking. You're not going to be hurt by looking. That's this, and that was mine. I mean, it's amazing, the things that we find. Here's a spring-loaded thing. You see that? That's your heel. That's the wrap that comes off your heel, the tendon that comes off of the heel. This has springs built into it, and I can see the way the torsion springs work, and the bumpers and these little latches and the pins that come off the latches. It's a spring assembly. This is the cradle where your tibia sits right on there. And that strap would have gone up to that tibia. And she has bones and hip bones and dozens of feet. She got a full leg the other day she found. Absolutely amazing. So, and we're finding things all over the earth, and people are sending them to me. So anyway, that is, it all falls in line. All right, and I'm sure I mentioned about 10 times in this presentation that it's mudfossils.com. I have a site up on here, and if you scroll down to the bottom on the left, there's DNA lab results here, and it goes into all of the different, what they did, the 3 different DNA samples, and how they did the clean ancient DNA extraction kit and so forth. And it goes down to all the different results, and positive, negative controls were negative. Two of them were highly dense with DNA. The third one wasn't quite as dense, but all three of them were positive for the Homo sapien mitochondrial cytochrome B gene and a mitochondrial D loop region, which was what they tested for. And then it comes down, and it was certified by the lab director. So this is not something that's just a silly little $29 test. This took months to do and was done in an extremely controlled environment. Everything was done correctly. So these claims that it was just silly and, you know, nothing can be right are nothing more than just people ignoring things. Now, the Jesse Garant did the CAT scans, and they are the most fabulous people, and I say that absolutely from my heart. If you ever need anything scanned and don't have it done here, then you need your head scanned. Unbelievable, helpful, can't say enough. The equipment was good, the software was easy to use, although my computer now, the one that I had, I no longer have it, so I don't have the CAT scans at hand, but they are online, and Jesse did 7 CAT scans for us. Then Gil Headley, who owns his own autopsy school and teaches worldwide, did the online work with me online, and we did literally an autopsy of my stuff online. And he's exceptionally talented, knew all kinds of things about the specimens that I had, and we went into fascia, which was something that was not really being heavily discussed at that time. This goes back several years, and he was extremely helpful, and I appreciate the help of all these people. So that is what needs to be done, is it needs to be looked at in a realistic light. Okay, we're going to leave it at that, and the next one is going to go into all of the details that I can come up with, and we're going to try to get back to 450,000 years ago, where we have the first accounts of the gods, which was in the Sumerian kings list, and it talks about them reigning. For one of them, I think, reigned 36,000 years. So they hold on to power pretty good. Anyway, and they were not on Earth at that time. They didn't come to Earth until just recently, it sounds like. And then we want to go into the Vedic texts and all of the Eastern texts and South America and all of that stuff. It's all tied together. It's all tied together. And that's our cumulative history. To run away from it is a big mistake in my mind. You know, especially when, you know, it's going to be an eternity. You're going to die. I'm going to die. I know that. And I'd like to know if there's something I can do to affect that in some more form of a positive way, you know, like climate controlled type of eternity would be nice. So anyway, that's what I'm looking at in the big picture. Take it for what you want. That's what I'm thinking about. And anyway, all of this stuff is reality. This is not just a joke. This is all living, from living creatures. Alright? So, take away what you will. The next thing's going to be about Gaia and all that stuff, I think. We'll see.